Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is Ruby Price, and today we're here to discuss qualifying for the United States Grand Prix. Joining me today, we have Formula Talk host Sophia Richmond.
Hi.
And from Grip Strip podcast, Phil Mathew.
Good evening.
Before we get into the episode, we must thank our sponsor for this episode, Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. Bet Online continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and car games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. And also be sure to follow us on our brand new socials at Grid Talk UK to stay up to date with the show. So another race week, another sprint weekend, and we're here on a Friday night in the UK analysing qualifying results. Do not adjust your sets, but there is no Red Bull car in the top five. What happened? Well, we'll get to that later. But for now, what you need to know is that Charles Leclerc is on pole position for Sunday's Grand Prix. But getting down to it, starting with Williams, Sophia, homeboy Logan Sargent was knocked out in Q1 once again, resulting in a P20, with his teammate Alex Albon qualifying for Sunday's race in P18. A tricky day for the Williams drivers, who haven't often had a double elimination in Q1 this season. Tell me about their qualifying and what can they do from 18 and 20 on Sunday?
I mean, not a lot in all honesty. Alex had some good opportunities kind of being in the top 10 in Q1. There was multiple chances. We've kind of seen Alex definitely getting into Q2 quite consistently compared obviously to Logan, who I think has only reached Q2 once, maybe even twice if I'm correct, if I'm not mistaken. I I mean, it's his second out of three home races for Logan Sargent. So, I mean, maybe third time's going to be a charm, and maybe he will get into Q2. Who knows? Maybe even Q3. That might be my bold prediction in Las Vegas. For Williams, it just wasn't their day. How the car is set up as well. Coda's not a favorite to their type of car. So we definitely knew that they were going to be like quite low. I wasn't expecting it to be both of them being out into Q1. As you mentioned, they've not had a double Q1 elimination for a while. So for them, I think it also depends on how sprint race goes on Saturday, because that also tire management and tire allocations are going to be probably a key thing throughout this weekend. Obviously, we did see it in Qatar as well. Obviously, there won't be any kind of harsh limits for pitting and all that. However, we'll see. I would I mean, will I think points? Absolutely not. I think it's just definitely going to be more kind of keeping their head down. Hopefully, Logan will finish a race. But that's kind of the best, I think, outcome for Williams is to keep their head down, not make some stupid mistakes, and have a good race.
Yeah, absolutely. Not having a bad race, just if they can get both drivers to finish, I think, they're likely to maybe have at least one driver potentially challenging for points. It all depends, as you say, on how well they are able to get their car managing that first sector, considering we are in Parc Ferme now. They can't make that many changes to their cars, even with another qualifying and an actual race session between now and Sunday. But Phil, the Aston Martin team have brought upgrades to their floor this weekend, but with a P19 for Lance Stroll and a P17 for Fernando Alonso, who described his Q1 lap as a good lap in the post-session press interviews. Their McLaren rivals are starting up in their top 10. How badly do Aston Martin need a good result on Sunday? And is it likely?
I think Fred was trying to bite his lip. He was doing everything in his power to not go do his usual off-script work, which must be with his older age now and being the quote, wily veteran, end quote. Because it took everything in his power to not say his like GP2 engine level kind of comments, because that was a bad session for them across the board. Fernando said he had a good lap, but I think Logan probably thought he had a good lap too, and he was 7/10 off the pole or whatever he was. So, I mean, they brought an upgrade on a sprint weekend, and he basically was making a veiled reference that it probably wasn't a good idea. They've been behind the 8 ball for the last few races. McLaren, of course, with the magic that has come since Silverstone, now all of a sudden is theoretically, depending on the weekend, the second best car. The chances of them scoring points, I mean, it'll be all on Fernando if there will be any points. The fact that Lance actually kept it clean is a bonus. He had issues in the single practice session, so that basically put a ruin to anything he was going to do. I mean, there's not very high expectations. He didn't have, so you could just get the read based on Fernando's comments. And based on his comments, I don't think he's expecting much of anything. That the sprint day will be better, but I don't think race day is going to provide much of anything to them. Keeping it like what Sophia was saying for Williams, keeping it clean because we're on the first of 3 weekends in a row is to a premium here because parts and all that are limited with the cost caps and everything. So if you go and bin something in this 3 race period, it's going to be much more difficult to get through the other races.
It definitely is. And of course, you mentioned keeping it clean. It was here, of course, that Stroll and Alonso came together on that mammoth back straight last season, which resulted in quite a lot of debris and ultimately was one of the reasons that spiced up last season's US Grand Prix at COTA. But Sophia, another team who an American outfit, Haas, brought their upgrades to their home race and yet deleted lap times, cost Hulkenberg, who qualified P16 in the end, and K-Mag just didn't seem to have the pace in Q2 to get into Q3. But could they have had a better day today? What do you think they can do on Sunday?
Oh, I mean, 100%. Magnussen was fighting in like the top 6 a few times. He was doing quite well into free practice. I think they just got so unlucky, especially Nico, with the track limits. And track limits, we're going to mention it a few times because there's other drivers that have had issues with that and just like track timing in general, going too slow on the off laps. But I was expecting more from Haas. But as you mentioned about the upgrades, I found that so stupid. Like, I understand because it's the start of a triple header. However, it is also a sprint. So they only have 1 practice session to get it right, 1 hour to test if the upgrades actually work before they go into Parc Ferme. I would have assumed to maybe do to Mexico and see from there because that gives them not enough data, especially if these upgrades are potentially one of the bigger upgrades that they are putting through. This is the crucial time where Haas needs to get like together and make sure that they're delivering. So right now they don't have enough data, I don't think. Right now, I think a lot of it will be speculating. However, on the flip side, using upgrades this week, we can see how they are before full races as well with the sprint. So there is obviously silver linings to how when to implement upgrades. I see the reasoning for both. I just find it not the best, maybe, given it's also quite late into the season for it. With that as well, with the triple header as well, there's always so much uncertainty as well, because if the upgrades don't work, we are away from the factories as well. So trying to get the parts, God forbid if there's any issues as well that happen in the sprint and they have to have replacement parts for the upgrades, they could get some penalties and some fines as well if they don't have backups for it. So we'll see. But for the qualifying, I was expecting both of them into Q2. K-Mag has been consistently doing quite well this week. Has been quite delivering, outperforming Nico a few times in qualifyings at the moment. I think they're quite tied right now in the driver head-to-head at the moment. But yeah, I was expecting a lot. We'll see how it looks in sprint and shootout, because I think maybe they might perform better in the sprint shootout and the sprint than obviously they would with the actual race, which seems to be kind of the case for Haas's in general. So we'll see. Unfortunately, track limits, but FIA is actually being very quick in their decisions for the first time ever as well, which obviously we have not seen any post-race issues or any mentions of post-race penalties to an extent surrounding track limits. So at least the FIA got track limits right for this qualifying session.
Just waiting for the notification now to say, oh, someone has
Don't
a
jinx it. Don't jinx it.
You're the one that said we haven't had any. But yeah, absolutely worth mentioning track limits. And of course, the next team we're going to talk about, Phil, Daniel Ricciardo, on his return to F1 after obviously his break due to his injury. Track limits cost him again, and he's P15 in Q2. His teammate 1,000th of a second quicker than Guan Yu Zhou. Tightest of margins at the front of Q2's elimination sector, and at the back, just the tightest of margins, costing drivers at the back of Q2's elimination sector. What do you think AlphaTauri can do to not tomorrow, of course, because that's the sprint, but from where they are, any chance of points? What can Daniel Ricciardo do from here as well?
I mean, Danny Rick loves it in the United States and Austin, likes riding horses and everything. Of course, he has to do that gingerly with his wrist injury. But coming back to drive this weekend, it's a very difficult circuit to come back in. I mean, granted, we see what happened at Qatar. It would have been really bad, but not having a lot of time, actual seat time with the only one practice probably hurt him a little bit. Yeah, the track limits also probably didn't do any better. But I mean, I think the AlphaTauris have shown a little bit more pace. I think with the sprint session that he will keep getting more comfortable in the car. I think we'll see the best out of Daniel by Sunday. I mean, you can overtake at Coda, so the chances are I think he can, at least with the right strategy, right, timings, with if a safety car or VSC comes out, maybe he can sneak up there. Sonoda's right there, so he's in the mix. The other Alphas are also up there, so that they're always kind of flirting with the borderline of points. You have the Alpines we'll mention later, and Perez, Piastri, etc. So I think that they're on the periphery there to get a point, and they're in the mix right now, trying to get up there, trying to get themselves out of the bottom of the constructors table. So, but when you're talking about 1 or 2 points, that's not enough. They're going to need more than that. That's not going to likely be in the cards. I think that we have to look at Mexico's next week and more like Brazil once we get to while we're at these last few races of the season, where if power unit issues start coming into play and some of the other aerodynamic parts. But we'll see what happens. I think Yuki has definitely shown himself to be much more steady this year, so I think he definitely has a chance to sneak a point.
Yeah, absolutely. This 2023 model AlphaTauri very much suiting Yuki Tsunoda at the very least. The AlphaTauri teammate, it did recently suit Liam Lawson, but Daniel Ricciardo obviously coming back now as the contracted driver. But Sophia, like I say, just behind Yuki Tsunoda, but ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, the Alfa Romeos, Valtteri Bottas P13, Guan Yu Zhou P12. A solid haul of points last time out. Do you think with the positions that they're starting and their recent pace, are points possible in the US for Alfa Romeo?
I think it's possible for maybe one, maybe both might be pushing it a little bit too much. But I mean, even though qualifying was very quiet, I didn't hear any kind of mention even in Q1 or in Q2 as well. Most of the time, the only time that they were mentioned on TV was when they were at risk and kind of trying to push out. But obviously that's kind of the case it's been most qualifyings when it comes to the Alphas. But yeah, I think definitely I would say probably Bottas over Zhou. I think potentially might have the upper edge, obviously, given he has more experience within this track and has been up in the grid, a lot higher in the grid for it. But I definitely do think it is possible. They have been performing quite well recently. And I think, yeah, definitely, I think it's, well, yeah, he also has won a race here. So he definitely has the most qualifications over his teammate for this upcoming race on Sunday. So, yeah, definitely, I think points, would back Bottas over Zhou, but it's good qualifying for them. I've said on multiple kind of good talk shows, like Alpha's the ones that you just want to be consistent and get being kind of the slow points earner sometimes as well. And I think that's what the team needs. They don't need to do any kind of risky overtakes, risky moves, just have their head down, feet on, and just race. And that's what they've been doing throughout the season so far, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Not quite a top 10 team so far this season, but certainly, have shown themselves to be there every now and then. And before we actually get to the top 5 teams, let's talk about the top 5 stars. And if you enjoy this podcast, we would love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Yes, I was rather proud of that, Seg. But if you're one of the 72% of people who aren't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider helping us out with a like and a subscribe. So let's look now at the top 5 teams. We've tackled the top 5 stars, Grid Talk obviously being one of them, myself being another. But Phil, looking at McLaren then, sort of opposite sides of the top 10, ultimately a very close qualifying session in the end. So that's obviously something to bear in mind. But Oscar Piastri starting P10, his teammate Lando Norris P2, just a few, how many was it? A few, barely a tenth and a bit off Leclerc at the front. I will actually get a proper figure at some point rather than a bit, but what do McLaren do from here then in terms of their race on Sunday? Do they obviously prioritize Lando Norris still chasing his first win? Do they put their strategy around getting Piastri up as far as he can and closing that gap to Aston Martin and potentially Ferrari in the constructors?
I mean, I think right now it's all eyes on Lando to try and get the maiden Formula One victory, at least with what's taken place today, Ruby. But I know also for Oscar, it's been a struggle with the qualifying most of the season, even though the numbers show that it isn't as far, the battle isn't that far off. Oscar has shown more on race pace throughout the season than he has on qualifying. It didn't seem like it was connected for him today, but it's fine. I think kind of like Ricciardo, Piastri will pick up as the weekend goes on. But for Lando, I think this is an opportunity, going against one of his BFFs on the front row in Charles Leclerc, trying to go and get that first victory, holding off the chosen one, and all that. But I mean, for Piastri to go and maximize points in the constructors, they're trying to go and get past Aston Martin, and then also, compete with Ferrari. That's, I think, the key. That's really what the battle is. I mean, we'll see what happens in the race itself. Tire deg is going to be huge. The temperatures are very high, and dry conditions plus high deg, and then the roughness of the surface at Coda. We'll see how that works with the McLaren as the weekend goes on. But Lando definitely has a good shot this weekend. Piastri is going to have to battle to move himself up through the bottom half of the top 10 there to try and sneak a top 6 finish, which I think is the maximum that he's probably going to get from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely right to mention the track surface at COTA. It is very rough and abrasive, and we've seen just how much of a difference between the old soft and new soft tire compounds was, how that's going to play out in terms of strategy over this whole sprint weekend where, you know, tire allocations ends up being a completely different priority to a standard race weekend, you know, something that's very, you know, uncharted territory almost, with only 1 hour's worth of running and teams obviously not getting that full hour necessarily. But yeah, Sophia, if we look at the next team, like I said at the start of this show, a little bit confusing if you've just been following the whole pattern of the story. But I think one highlight, of course, of qualifying is that even with his teammate being angry about being in his wake, you know, and also having a track time deleted, Sergio Perez is still behind Max Verstappen in qualifying. But P9 for Sergio Perez, P6 for the world champion-elect Max Verstappen. Just what happened to Red Bull today? Like, what was there something wrong with the car? You know, or is it the driver, or is it track limits? Is the problem track limits, Sophia?
God, I mean, nothing, half of it, nothing's changed. Perez is still behind Max and not performing well in qualifying. That is still the case for it. I think with Max's one, like watching it back and like the radio that Max had about his teammate, I don't understand why he was complaining about it because of saying that it was his way, but he wasn't offline. It looked like he was either under or oversteer into that last corner. It didn't seem like there was any fault of Perez. With the track limits, that last one kind of did my head because he was purple in the first sector, then yellow in the second sector, and then obviously he went wide, but he was still technically P1. And then, but obviously we knew that track limits would take place. But I just don't understand how he is that fast when he is from purple to yellow to like potentially, I think it was purple again as well. Like, he is a great driver, don't get me wrong. He's proven that now, winning the championship and everything and winning his third title. I just don't understand why it's so different between him and Checo. Obviously, the car is more suited a bit more to Max, but I feel like that should still not make as much of a difference to why there's such a big gap. This gap between P9 and P6 is probably what we wanted up at the top, in the top five between both of the Red Bulls, not down in the bottom half of the top 10. I mean, it's a tall stack, kind of, for Max to win for P6. He's done it before, so it is possible. When it comes to Perez's performance, I'm not expecting much, and that's just how it's been this whole season, where he's just not performing well. I think, could he be in the points? Tricky. I would say maybe he'll be on the borderline cusp, which that's not what you want for a Red Bull who has won constructors now, won the championship like his teammate. He is on the fence. It's been in the media all this time as well about Checo, what's happening. Obviously, there's rumors about if he doesn't perform well or doesn't finish second in the drivers, Daniel Ricciardo's going to take his seat. Not sure if that's confirmed or whatever. It's just obviously silly season still ongoing, but he's not performing well. Even if you compare it to Checo last season as well, he was performing better than this season, but still not performing where a number two or just even a teammate should be. And so we'll see. But I mean, it is Max going, like I said, Finn P6 is one. It's not a tall stack for him. I think it's probably consistent. I would say probably towards the half end of the races when he will be up in like P1, P2. I won't think it's going to be straight away because I think there's going to be a lot of good battles happening. But I do think that they will push harder for the sprint now as well. And who knows, maybe Red Bull might have both of them in the top five for the sprint. We'll see how it goes for the shootout tomorrow and for the sprint in general as well. But we'll see. I just, some of it's usual, Perez being behind Max, but Max coming into P6 is something you don't see every day.
You certainly don't. Maybe it's something that generally just happens when we have qualifying on a Friday. Like, it throws up the order, it throws up the schedule. Who knows, I guess, really. But this is 2 years in a row that Verstappen has had issues at Qatar. Maybe Red Bull just don't. Did I say Qatar? Kota. It's almost the same. It's too late. But you know, second year in a row that Max has had an issue at COTA, which has, impacted where he's ended up on the racetrack at one point or another. But Phil, moving on to a team who have just got a big boost in cash and investors, Alpine, and a boost in performance, seemingly, despite obviously having, their request by the FIA to get a little bit of a boost in engine power. But P8 for Esteban Ocon, P7 for Pierre Gasly. Where has this come from Alpine? And is this where Alpine should have really been the whole season based on how they've liked to talk this season?
I don't know. I think it's maybe all the Swifty stuff and wearing all the Travis Kelce jerseys and Patrick Mahomes and all the other references that we have to investors, since they have like 72,000 investors now at Alpine. That might have something to do with it. The American vibes, maybe Ocon and Gasly like Texas barbecue. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe the team is a little more motivated this week because they probably got $5 more in their checks. But to be fair, this is theoretically they've been in this kind of realm. They've been in the 8th to 12th realm all year. The fact that both of them made it into Q3 and were very close to each other is not that surprising, in that they're a very equal driver pairing. Having both of them make it in and not have a problem. I mean, granted, it's not a race yet, so we already have 2 more races to go this weekend. So that's when Alpine will really truly show itself. And Kelsey and Mahomes and all these other people can't fix the power unit. But credit to them to get both of them in qualifying. This is a balanced circuit, kind of a little bit of everything, which is where I think Alpine can go and show their strengths. Does it mean that they're going to be up in the top 5? Doubtful, but they're in a position where they're kind of in no man's land. They can do whatever they want, score points. Getting a double points finish this weekend is possible, but you need to get both cars over there, and that's, I think, the biggest factor. Looking at what they need to do for next year, so that they're actually in the mix with other not customer, but like other teams within their tier, which was McLaren and then Aston Martin is their goal. So I mean, it's a good story that they both are in. We'll see what they do tomorrow. I think that will be a greater indicator of what their likely scenario will be on Sunday. But if they can repeat this in the sprint qualifying shootout thingy, and then also the sprint itself.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, no points are handed out on a Friday. Remember when we used to say that about Saturdays, and then they decided to start giving out points on Saturdays instead? Now I'm just waiting for some form of points to be handed out on Fridays in the near future. Maybe from 2026, who knows? But Sophia, let's look at Mercedes then. So George Russell, P5, Lewis Hamilton, P3. Of course, last time out, they did come together at turn 1. Last season at COTA in the race, George Russell took out a car at turn 1. I don't know if you can pick up the pattern that I'm implying may or may not happen here, but ultimately 2 tenths between the Mercedes. Is that gap going to get too smaller this weekend in turn 1? In the sense that, both drivers are going to be occupying the same piece of tarmac for a bit? Or are Mercedes, now that the boss is back and, they've had their week and a bit of, all the media reporting on Mercedes rivalries, how are Mercedes going to perform on Sunday, do you think? They do seem to go well around at least the second half of this circuit.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Mercedes did say that they were going to come competitively, and even Red Bull mentioned it as well. And I was still kind of skeptical, but obviously they have proven me wrong for it. I mean, George is behind Lewis in the race, so it's going to be interesting to see who gets faster off the line, and I think that will determine how we'll go into turn 1. I think because of the incident that happened, I think both of them are going to play it more safe. And just kind of support each other. I think the main focus is to battle to get these constructor points because they are close battles with some of these other teams, and I think that's now their main focus. Obviously, they would like to be higher in the drivers' championship, 100%, but the constructors' championship, I think, is where they want to focus more. So, I would say if I was Toto, I would be like, just keep your head down, don't make any stupid mistakes, and I think that's probably what is really realistically going to happen. However, when it comes to the sprint, that's going to be a different kind of scenario. I think it's going to be chaotic for Mercedes, but that's just because I want some kind of chaos as well at Coda. Hamilton loves this track. He has had podiums every year besides 2013 where he finished fourth. So it is possible that he will probably finish where he started. I think it's definitely going to be quite realistic for it. I think George will have some really good opportunities to also be close in contention with the podium. I do definitely think both teams with points 100% if people don't do something stupid. I think if anything was to happen, it wouldn't be their fault. I think it will be somebody else's fault. Obviously, you have George with Max on the same row. That should be interesting to see. You obviously have Sainz ahead with Hamilton, and then obviously Charles and Norris in the top spot. So we'll see. It's a good first three rows for the start of race on Sunday. So I'm excited to see. But yeah, as long as Mercedes keeps their heads down, it's been a good qualifying for them. Obviously, George was caught out for track limits, so he only had one opportunity to get a lap in for this Q3. And I think the fact that he put it into P5, that is a great feat because I think his time pre track limits got deleted was aiming for about a P7, P6. So the fact that even though it did get deleted, he still performed better. So I think that was quite a good thing to see for George. But yeah, I'm expecting bigger things maybe for sprint. Who knows? I could be the same positions, if not maybe both of them in the top three. It definitely seems possible, I think. And I think Red Bull should be a bit scared as well.
Here's a follow-up question. Do you think George Russell will also be 0.02 of a second quicker than Verstappen in qualifying in the sprint tomorrow?
Probably not. I mean, in all honesty, I think Max will try to not do track limits and be in contention for pole. I think it's just gonna be close still. I think there will be some drivers that'll be very close to each other. I mean, even Hamilton and Norris were quite close to each other as well. Not as close, obviously, from Russell and Max, but it's a quite small gap within the top 10. So I'm expecting the same for tomorrow's Saturday's sprint shootout and qualifying for that, and also for the sprint race as well.
Yeah, a very close weekend is what we are certainly hoping for, especially after the 2023 F1 season that we've had, where not necessarily the whole season has been close. And in fact, some races have absolutely had quite a gap. But Phil, we can't not talk about Ferrari, who, a team that I think quite a lot of us had kind of written off earlier in this season, have certainly put at least a good step forward over the last few races, certainly since Monza at the very least. Carlos Sainz P4, Charles Leclerc P1. The driver who's generally been the slower of the two Ferraris over the previous few weekends has put his name back on that top step for pole position. Carlos Sainz obviously being quicker in Q1, and then Leclerc just seemingly having a handle on his teammate for the final two sectors. First of all, how happy will Ferrari be to obviously get a pole, considering, it was a little bit handed to them thanks to track limits, but ultimately you've got to get your lap in, and it's Max's fault for going out of the track limits. How good was this for Ferrari today, and will their jubilance continue this weekend?
I mean, I think for Charlie wants to carry this out and get a win this year, knowing that the smooth operator has one on him in that sense. I mean, you getting the pole here at Coda, he's Mr. Sprint Weekend because he's been doing great work all year doing that and qualifying well. So I would getting one up on Carlos, big props to Charles there. And I mean, it's going to be a good battle between him and one of his BFFs in Lando Norris. And it also, we have to see what he does. You know, we know that Charles Leclerc is very fast and he's fast on one lap, but can he put a race together and a track which adds a lot of different characteristics? It's a difficult track to put in a race to put together at COTA. So can Ferrari itself put this race together? That's the question that I see. And then can Charles not make a mistake? In a lot of ways, he reminds me of Pecco Bagnaia, the current MotoGP world champion, in that he has ultimate pace, but then he's liable to make an insane mistake. And he's well loved, too, by the people that he races for, too. So, I mean, I think Carlos is going to be up there all day. It's top 5, definitely. And it makes that battle for McLaren even tougher to try and get up there to try and overtake Ferrari, because they're fighting 2 against 1, Lando versus Carlos and Leclerc. But, I mean, I think we'll see how they handle Verstappen when he's coming up there. But today, with the football themed helmet in his 100th Grand Prix for Ferrari, no less, and American football, which he even said made no sense, but I liked it. It was cool. Gets a pole and gets to celebrate, and we'll see what they do tomorrow. I'm curious as to how they will do in this sprint qualifying and that race itself, to kind of see where the tire deg holds for the Ferrari duo.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've gone through the grid from today's qualifying session. Let's look ahead. Let's make some predictions for Sunday. So, Sophia, who do you think is going to obviously be on the podium? Who takes your win and your P2 and P3?
I might just go with the safe answer, and I think Max will take P1. It's just statistically he has been performed well from different positions on the grid, so I think he will take it, but I think it won't be straight away. P2, I think Lando. I would like to see his 4th podium in a row. I think that'll be quite good. I don't think he would win, which really restricts me to say as a McLaren fan, but I think there's just something missing. There's something that needs to switch on. And then P3. Let's go with, I'll be basic. Let's do Hamilton. Let's keep the tradition alive to keep him on having a podium for all his races but one at COTA. Yeah.
So no Ferraris then as well. No Ferraris on the podium for Sophia.
I don't trust the strategies. I honestly, the only reason why they did well last week is because Carlos was doing some of the calls, I think. I honestly stand by that.
Yeah, I mean, it's Ferrari strategy. It's that much of a meme. Phil, your podium prediction, please, for Sunday.
We'll go Verstappen P1. I'll say that Lewis ends up P2, and 3rd will be Leclerc. With the battle with Lando, he'll end up falling short of that podium.
Ooh, very, very interesting indeed. Two very similar but slightly different podium predictions there, but not quite so bold. Now, Sophia, your bold prediction, something a little bit spicy, something not statistically, gonna happen really, but give us your bold prediction for Sunday.
I got 2 at the top of my head. I'll take the non-safer one, and I would say both Alphas into the points. I think it'll be probably P9, P10, but...
Which Alphas? We have 2.
Alfa Romeo, yeah, Zhou and Bottas.
Those
Oh,
Alphas.
not Alfa, sorry, yeah. Yeah. Zhou and Bottas. Leaning on to what I said earlier in the episode, how I think one of them can definitely get points. I'm going to say bold and say both of them will get points. No, AlphaTauri, I'm not even kind of engaging into that conversation between Yuki and Daniel Ricciardo. Sorry.
Would certainly be something. Phil, your bold prediction, please.
I mean, I always do this because I'm trying to, harken back to George's deal with George Russell. The problem is Logan just does not have that same level of energy as old Georgie boy did. And it took him a while, but it finally happened. Don't think it's going to happen this weekend. So I can't go there. Bold prediction is, and this is bold because of how great I talk about Haas. I'm going to say that Nico Hulkenberg finishes in the top 6.
Wow, that is bold.
It's bold because I know there's
work if that's the scenario.
It's bold, and I have not had any alcoholic beverages. I'm been clean for a few months, so that there's no substances involved in that prediction.
Wow, Phil. Yeah, nice and bold there from both of you. But now let's give you guys a chance to do some self-promo or some promo or just, whatever it is you want to promote. But Sophia, you come to us from our sister show, Formula Talk, and also you do some stuff involved with the EF1. Go for it. What do you want to tell us about today?
Yeah, so as mentioned, I do work with Everything F1. I mostly do articles surrounding F2, F3 feeder series. Obviously, F1 Academy is at COTA this weekend, so there'll be some articles discussing about that, which also leads into my other piece of work, which obviously is our sister show, which is Formula Talk, hosted by myself and Tom Downey and a few special guests throughout the seasons. We talk about all feeder series, so we just released our preview for the F1 Academy final rounds that are taking place at COTA. We'll have a review show coming up after this race weekend and discuss also the Formula 3 Championship. So you can find Formula Talk where you find Grid Talk, and then if you want to see my work for Everything F1, it's on www.everythingf1.com, or you can find us on socials at JoinEF1.
Absolutely. Go and check it out. And Phil, you come to us from the Grip Strip podcast. Do you want to plug that? Do you want to plug anything else? Let us know. Let's take it away.
I'll promote the Grip Strip podcast, where this week was episode 191. We talked about all the events. We previewed the U.S. Grand Prix. When it's usual suspects that way, I went a little deviated off of my predictions from what I said earlier this week to now, but myself and Josh, a fine former guest on this show or panelist, we talk about all things racing. I say as long as it goes fast, we talk about it on the Grip Strip podcast, and we'll be around next weekend, close to 200 episodes. Go over the U.S. Grand Prix. We're in this 3-week run, so previewing Mexico. We'll talk about the NASCAR playoffs coming down to the end there. There's other news that has come out in regards to this Indy Next, including Jamie Chadwick, who will be coming back next year for a second year at Andretti Global, the team that we probably going to be talking about here more on this show too. You can find us at Grip Strip Pod on Twitter. You can find the show at philipgmatthew.com, my blog site, and on YouTube at Grip Strip Podcast. And thanks, Ruby, for all the great work, knowing that it's very late, and Sophia also. And, of course, for Aiden, at whatever time it is, credit to you that you do this. Credit to all of you. Love being on here on the Grid Talk podcast.
Thank you, Phil. And as always, it is nice having you on. And, it's not just about us when it ends up being 12 o'clock when we're recording our shows. You being in the US and, being involved, and Aiden being involved in completely different time zones to me and Sophia, it is, of course, appreciated every single time. And if people want to find me on the socials, I am at Rubes001 on Instagram and Threads, because I am one of those people who is actively using Threads. And you can find me on YouTube at Ruby Price. But Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live. It's late. We'll do a little bit of a post show, just obviously to go through some comments and stuff like that. But you can also catch Grid Talk on Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our huge back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to qualifying and the race results. Please consider supporting the channel on Patreon so we can get mics, lights, and better recording equipment. And also make sure you subscribe so you're the first to know when each new weekly episode is released. We'll be back soon with plenty of more F1 content. Tomorrow, it's the sprint. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye. So, jumping into the post show then, a few comments from myself and Sophia Richmond, because we were so keen for our own show.
It's been a while for both of us.
It has, like this has been my first show in quite a few races, really. But looking through some comments, we've got Jared Bradley, rather active in there. Thank you, Jared. Very grateful to have you sticking around and watching us at this time. Caught some of Q3, but your living room has been taken over by a post-semi-final dance party. We all just missed the Macarena and Gangnam Style. Now, those are two very different periods of dance music. But I'll take missing out on it personally. But as long as people are enjoying themselves. But to actually get to some F1 questions. We got a comment from Punctured Ball. I like what you guys are saying. Good pod and keep them coming. Well, thank you for the feedback every time. But don't see Danny cutting it. Sorry. And Jared's obviously said as well, Danny is having a rough time on track in the limited time he's had. Now, for me, I kind of think that if Perez is visibly off the pace at the minute, and if Daniel Ricciardo can get what's considered a good result in that AlphaTauri, then that's obviously going to fuel this rumor mill that has been going around for quite a while. What do you guys think? Like, is there any truth whatsoever to if Perez loses P2 in the championship, Daniel Ricciardo is going to be put into that second Red Bull seat? What do you think is the most likeliest outcome here?
I think it is reasonable. I think given the performance Perez has had over the last two seasons, I think this season's been worse than previous season performance-wise. I think obviously media's been kind of stirring up a lot of problems and situations and awkward kind of feelings probably within the team, which obviously does not help in performance. Had Ricciardo not had the accident and was able to perform well, I think it would also solidify the rumors a lot more. But also at the same time, we also got to see Liam Lawson, and apparently he's rumored for 2025, maybe even 2024. He should have a seat, point blank, because of how he has performed over the last couple of races as well. So I think there was some silver lining to it. But if Daniel Ricciardo can perform well in these last couple of races, even with coming back from an injury and being out for a bit of time, that I think will be a bigger nail in the coffin for Checo to have his contract broken. And we've seen before, it's not the first time someone's broken contract. And given
it won't be the first time Red Bull have broken a contract.
Yeah, I was gonna say, with how many seasons they've done that over the years?
How many seasons have they existed?
Yeah, it's definitely not just a one-off season kind of thing. It's very often. So I mean, we had 3 in in one season this year anyway for the AlphaTauri seat. So 2. But yeah, it definitely is possible. I think there is some truth to those rumors, and we'll probably see it closer to Abu Dhabi. I think it'll be announced before Abu Dhabi if that's going to happen.
Do you have any thoughts?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I think
you can go.
I mean, there was rumors about it being announced next week that he's going to announce his retirement or whatever
at his home Grand Prix.
At his home Grand Prix, saying that he wants to go and spend time with family or whatever it is. because Red Bull they're getting into Hollywood script writing so that they can go and make it look good. That they ran him out the door and ran him over with a bus the way that they've been doing it for the last year or two. I mean, it really, in a lot of ways, it's just a much ruder version of what was going on when Valtteri wasn't cutting it at Mercedes, and people were like, they need to get rid of him for whoever, but then it became get rid of him for Georgie boy, and then they finally did. It's with Red Bull. I mean, I'm not going to go off on a tangent. It's not the show. I do it on my show plenty with how I feel about them and OEM and Horner and all. But I mean, what do they really think they're going to accomplish? You're going to put Ricardo in there, who we're coming off of a year ago when he couldn't get out of his own way. Now he's become a test driver / now he's a test and reserve driver that now is driving for the second team. You don't know if you want him to go, and he's going to go and hold Verstappen's water. I mean, what does it matter? I mean, it really they're running Perez out. Yes, he hasn't had a good year. Yes, it's been bad, but the car does not suit him. But we already know that. It's the same kind of stuff that went on with Mark Webber. It's not as toxic because Mark Webber actually fought back. Sergio Perez is just laid down, and he's been abused by Marco in the media, and then you have enough stuff going on there. For his well-being and his health, I would say just leave, man. There's plenty of places that you could actually go and race and be in a good place, and he would be very fast. Like, I don't know, the World Endurance Championship, like IMSA, like IndyCar. I mean, he probably won't do IndyCar, but, he could come to any number of series and be respected. The Liam Lawson thing, like you brought up, Sophia, it's kind of like Pedro Acosta in MotoGP, where KTM wanted to get an extra bike or bikes so that they had 5 contracts for 4 bikes. So then they made Pol Espargaro take a year off so that they could bring Pedro Acosta up. It's the same kind of deal. You need to. They've done such a bad job handling contracts over 2 decades of being in existence that this is yet another example. I figure that they're going to put Ricardo in the second car so he can be Verstappen's lackey. They'll have Liam Lawson out there in the second, whatever they're going to call that team next year. And with Yuki Tsunoda,
Bulls Racing. Allegedly, that's the rumor mill.
I've got they can do a better name for that. I'll send it to them. I'm sure they won't use it. But yeah, him and Tsunoda racing in the Red Bull RB19 next year, and that's what they'll be doing. And Sergio will be away when who knows what he'll be doing, but I think he'll probably become an IMSA if that's the case, and that'll be good for us because he's a good representation, having the Mexican presence as well, which would be good because you have Pato O'Ward in IndyCar. So,
yeah. Just to go to another comment question, we might make this the last one. Sophia, you didn't get much chance to talk about the Aston Martins, of course, during the race, but we've got comments from Puncture Ball and Jared sort of interacting. Aston Martin have had a bad time. They've been uncompetitive since the first round of upgrades came through in the early season, whereas McLaren and Ferrari are making the most of it and expecting a podium from both. Now, at the start of the season, Fernando Alonso looked like the only driver who could challenge for a podium. And, they've come to COTA, they've brought upgrades. Granted, of course, one practice session this morning before, not even this morning, one practice session before qualifying, and then they jump into qualifying with the car locked in Parc Fermé. They will have wanted to be coming into qualifying, expecting Q3. It's such a bad sort of place that they've got themselves to, really.
I mean, it comes back to the conversation I had with about Haas bringing in upgrades as well. I think it's just not the right time. I said this in the after the preseason testing that Aston Martin, everyone was on the Martin hype train saying, "Oh my God, they're going to do so well. Alonso could win a race this season, podiums." No, I knew they were gonna drop. I called it that they were gonna drop, and this is a case in point. I think Stroll now has been knocked out too many times into Q1. He's not performing well. Obviously, he's had some issues with stewards, being called to the stewards about how he has presented himself at races. Obviously, we've talked about that in Qatar. I I mean, rumors of Lawrence backing out of it and selling his shares out, potentially a rename of Aston Martin as well. I think they've been evolving, but just going backwards, in that kind of sense. I they they've thrown so much money, and especially because they were lower last season, so they had more wind tunnel time, they had more potential development funding and everything, and a lot of them probably started building because they had a second B spec car as well. That Lance said a few times, "Oh, we'll just use the B spec." Both not doing well. Whatever spec they're using is still not good. It just doesn't make sense. Whereas, as mentioned, McLaren and Ferrari are making the best of it, and like they are getting the podiums, they are top performing. I think the relying on Alonso's skills and experience now, and right now it's just run out. Like I don't see Alonso winning anymore. I don't see Alonso. Well, I don't think he will win this season. I don't see him getting a podium for the rest of the season as well because Aston Martin's moved too far back to the point that other constructors now are going to take Aston Martin's part in the constructors championship, which might be a blessing for next season for Aston Martin because they'll have more wind tunnel development time and potentially more time to focus on it. But at the same time, there's like Stroll's just not performing well, causing issues. Obviously, they didn't have much time for both of them. Only 5 laps for Stroll, I think 8 laps for Alonso in free practice. Then issues with brake dust and like the wheel guns. It's just not going well for Aston Martin since returning back from summer break. And then I'm not sure if you can hear that, but it's a crazy Friday night where I am in Manchester, I guess. Um, but yeah, I'm not expecting much from Aston Martin now. I think they're going to go back to what they used to be before the hype happened at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, so I mean, I concur with what Sophia was saying, minus all the screaming that was going on back there. That's probably more exciting than what Aston Martin's been bringing to the table for the last few months of the season here. I mean, it's a great way to start the season and go in the tank, so you can go and get more money for development. But you have Felipe Drogovic sitting there, former Formula 2 world champion, and I think he'd be plenty capable. But they're not going to ever put him in the car because a certain somebody is in that car. They've done a bad job. Yeah.
He just won't retire.
Right. Napoleon Jr. Yeah, but like in terms of that team, they spent all this money, they got the new wind tunnel and they have this big new facility, and now they're going to be racing in WEC in both the hypercar category, and they're going to be in the GT3, whatever, LMGT3. So, what is your focus? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to race for a world championship? Are you trying to race to just make up the numbers? I mean, Haas does that, and Red Bull does that with the other team. Until next year, we'll see. But some of these teams, like for this Aston Martin team, they don't. I don't know what their plan is. I don't know what they're trying to do. They do have a driver that is one of the best drivers in the last 20 years, but he's 42 years old. The days of Fernando Alonso carrying a team on his back is not there anymore. He's more likely to, if you give him the piece, he can do great stuff with it. He's a great defender, but at some point you have to also be realistic. And their fall from grace is pretty bad, going from being a front row starter regularly, being in Q3 every race all year until today. And now you're 17th and 19th. I mean, that is epically bad. But who knows? I mean, I always say stranger things have happened. It is Formula One, but they're not in the mix right now, and I don't see what their plan is for next year. I mean, they do have a plan for 26, and that they're going to be Honda's team, but what are they going to be by 2026? We still have another 2 full seasons to go before we get to that point. And hopefully by then, Lance is out of that one of the seats, so for the sake of society, and then so that they actually have 2 good drivers. But we'll see what happens with that.
Yes, we will. And we will see what happens in the sprint, and Grid Talk will be here to talk about it at 12:30 a.m. UK time on Sunday morning. So for those of you trying to figure that out, it's if you stay up and then it becomes Sunday. But we'll have 2 shows on Sunday, which is going to be weird. But it will also be it'll be Saturday in the US. So get your heads around that as you will. But thank you very much, both of you, of course, for joining me for this show. Thank you, Aidan, as ever, for doing the live production. Thank you to everyone who's stuck around for this long, particularly if you are in the UK or somewhere else where it's quite late. Obviously, your attendance and attention is completely, very much valued. But like I say, it will be back tomorrow, Sunday, or Saturday in the US for the sprint, and we'll be back on Sunday again for the race. So thank you very much for joining us, and we shall see you next time. Bye.